She placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Luke 2:7. Good morning and welcome to the Humble Homestead. Let's reset the kitchen and bake some bread in preparation for our family Christmas gathering. Today I'm making a French bread recipe from the Praire Homestead Cookbook by Jill Winger. I will link that down below. I'm making this because I'm going to try a new recipe for a French toast bake. First, I started with 1.5 cups of warm water and 1.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. I mixed those in the bowl and allowed them to sit for about 10 minutes while the yeast activated. I then added 1 teaspoon of sea salt and about 3 to 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. You could mix this by hand and then knead it on the counter by hand for 7 to 8 minutes. But I'm choosing today to use my stand mixer to do the work for me while I clean the kitchen. I don't think we go through any Christmas season without a reminder that Jesus came into this world in less than ideal circumstances. Most portrayals of Jesus' birth are of a warm and nostalgic feel. And although the true scenario was far from pleasant, I believe that the peace was genuine as Mary and Joseph welcomed their precious baby that they knew was the King of the world. I consider my own heart as I prepare my very small home for my very large family. There was no room for a Savior who came to prepare a place for us. We are created to live in community and to be content with what God has placed before us. I do believe it's okay to desire for more or different or better, but our hearts must be able to find contentment with where we are. It's okay to have dreams that are God-sized. Those dreams could be in the form of your family size, the homestead, the dream to be at home, to raise your family and make things an atmosphere of peace. The dream could be to have children. The dream could be to have a successful career. As long as it's centered in God, it's okay to dream. I even considered the image that I was portraying with the aesthetic of my home. A lot of times we see homesteaders or homemakers sharing their homes with us on social media, and they're very similar, I feel, in the aesthetic that they show, and mine is different. Ours is a much smaller, a much simpler, a much more cluttered space, and that's okay. In just a few hours, these walls will be filled with family, love, laughter, and probably even some drama. And I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. Nobody's gonna care if the trim is finished. Much like Bethlehem, there will be standing room only as we gather in anticipation of our Savior's birth. I'm kind of laughing at myself this morning because I thought that perhaps doing a voiceover would be easier to try. I've never done a video like this, and I thought, I'm just going to get out the camera and record, and I won't worry about the conversations I'm having with Phil or the stuff he comes in hooting and hollering because he doesn't know I'm recording. I won't worry about the dog barking and all of that. But I'm here to tell you that doing this voiceover has proven harder than I ever thought this morning. I've had to stop and start over so many times. And you would think at 5 in the morning your house would be quiet, but it isn't. Matthias joined me out in the living room less than 2 minutes after I got up. I did get him to finally lay back on the couch and fall back asleep, but you may or may not hear him in the background snoring. The dog is upset because there's no room for her on the couch, and so her nails are traipsing across the floor. I will say that one aesthetic that probably matches other homesteaders is the endless amount of jars on our counter. My daughter-in-law often will say stuff about the jars on the counter because they do accumulate. And part of the reason is I don't have a really great storage system because we live in such a small house. A lot of times they have to go out into the breezeway, and that just means that they're going to become much dirtier much quicker. So if I need them again, it's going to be more work. So sometimes I will just allow them to accumulate on the counter, or until I can gather them and go put them all away at the same time. She came the other day and said that she was watching something else of another homesteader, and they too had a ton of jars on their counter. So I guess I'm doing that right. My bread finished kneading, so I am putting that in a covered bowl. I put it in the oven for about an hour or until the dough doubles in size. Our house is generally on the cooler side, so I had turned on the oven for just a few minutes to get the heat started and then turned it off and then let it rise with the oven open while I continued to clean. I'm now going to put this out on the counter. Don't forget to line your baking sheet because you want to be able to transfer them easily. I have the oven preheating at 425, and I have a baking stone in the oven. If you ever use a baking stone, you do want to make sure you're heating that with your oven. Just going to roll this out into 2 loaves. I don't want to over process the loaves because you want those air pockets in there to create a decent rise. Once I form these 2 loaves and get them laid out, I am going to cover them and set them back on the stove for about 15 minutes to rise. Now it will be warmer on the stovetop since I have the oven preheating. And you know, gas stoves, the heat tends to radiate out from the back side of the stovetop. I'm excited to use one of these loaves for a French toast bake or casserole that I'm using for our Christmas brunch. I've actually never made a French toast bake, so I'm pretty excited about it. Every year we do a Christmas brunch with our children, but this year we're just going to include the entire family. After they've risen for another 15 minutes, we're going to place multiple slices across the top of the loaves. You can use a regular serrated knife or this fancy little tool that I have for my sourdough. You've seen me beat the egg, so then we're going to just brush on an egg wash. I have my stone in the oven preheating, as well as a small pan beneath the stone that you'll see in just a moment. I'm going to place the bread on top of the stone. I'm struggling with which to do first, but you actually want to pour the water in after you place the bread because you want to close your oven quickly. This helps to create some steam that you want to trap into the oven. The kitchen is all reset and ready for the chaos. I pray that you have a blessed and peaceful holiday season, and I thank you for growing with me.